Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sunday. Welcome to my show on Techie Talks with Raghav. Today, I have Raman. Raman is a well known uh, director of engineering in a well known company, and he's in this industry for more than a decade. And we were talking about a lot of things over past 1 week, I guess, and we found out so many different technologies he was involved in, so many different implementations he was involved in, let it be AWS, Redshift, Snowflake. I mean, there are a lot of things what we spoke about. And during this conversation, we thought you should come on to our show and let our viewers listen to you. And rather than me introducing, Raman, why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners? And first of all, thank you for accepting our invitation.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Raghav. My name is Raman. And as mentioned, I've been in the industry for around 13 years now. I've sort of gone through a full cycle where I've seen a set of technologies change multiple times. I've sort of worked in a horizontal sphere where I've worked in the software engineering, back and front end databases, to data engineering, to machine learning, to managing those teams now, and sort of in a horizontal vertical. I work in a company called Fathom, based here in Vancouver. We are a startup where we basically unlock the power to understand any communities in their own words. Basically, we have a platform where we analyze open-ended text responses based on surveys to basically uh, find more accurate than ever before what communities, what set of people are trying to say. And we use a lot of latest technologies in that. LLMs are obviously the latest hype, and that's what we are also using as part of our offering.
Very good. So I think you hit the right point already where we are going in this conversation. So what is an LLM, right? What is this large language model? What is going on? What is this hype about?
That's a really good and interesting point. These are basically the AI models which are designed to understand and generate human language. These models are basically trained on a vast amount of text data and uses deep learning technologies on often based on neural networks to basically process and generate this data or this text actually. In this model, the large basically refers to the extensive amount of data and the parameters being used, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, one interesting thing is if we have already used people have used GPT or Chat GPT. One thing which I always like to point out is that GPT is a language engine. It is not a reasoning engine. Uh, Obviously, if we do something and it can sort of reason and give us an answer, but it cannot do like logical reasoning as our brain can. So it mostly uses basically common sense sort of uh, reasoning to come up with the language, which a lot of time looks like a proper reasoned statement, but it might not be. It is really important
Okay.
when working with like language models to understand that they are the language generation models, not reasoning models.
Okay. Okay. So they generate something, but they cannot think or reason exactly similar to like a human. That is where this is going. Okay.
Pretty
All right.
much, and
So,
that's really
mhm.
important. Also, when we are working with any kind of products, to not blindly overtrust and have sort of some kind of governance or some kind of human in the loop verification there to make sure that what kind of reasoning it's coming up with is proper. It's not hallucinating.
Okay. So the reason should be reasonable, right?
Mhm.
The reason should be reasonable, not completely out of the bounds. Okay, I asked you how to cook a meal, and you are trying to give me an answer to cook a meal for 1,000 people, maybe, right? So I'm asking you to cook one small, whatever it is. I'm just extrapolating. So you are saying it can generate text randomly, but if there is no human in between, the human in loop, the output would not be reasonable. it's a very good way to look at it. So how is this growth happening, and how are you as a company, or how are you as a person learning towards it to get the human in the loop? Or how is this growth of LLMs going to impact, or how is the work happening on the ground today? Any, you want to share any light on that?
Uh, so basically, one thing which again we keep talking about GPT, because that is sort of what started this sort of
Yes.
hype cycle. But there are a lot of other models, right? Anthropic is another company; they have their own cloud models. Then there are open source models, Falcon, Llama, quite a few others, right? But basically, with the introduction of GPT, what happened is we realized that it has capabilities in a lot of verticals wherever we have basically any kind of language processing, right? And that's where basically it comes in, and that's why this hype, and a lot of this hype is really justifiable, because it is a technical shift of how we process language basically, and any vertical, right, where we can process language, LLMs are going to impact. We see a lot of startups coming up in different verticals, right? uh, a lot of them directly customer facing, a lot of them which process all this language on the back end to make sort of users life easy, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, any basically, in short, any industry which has any component which rely on language will see impacted by LLMs, right? Be it, for example, any kind of content generation and marketing. We already see it can
Yes.
create short form content, it can create blog posts, right? It can write longer articles. Even I've seen examples where people have written full book chapters using LLMs or GPT, right? uh, Finance, legal are, but still, because both of these fields are the ones which are heavily reliant on the text. If we are in a finance, obviously we rely on a large amount of textual data. Same with legal, right? Again, it makes it easy to
Mm.
process, but it need to be verified, because
Right.
both finance and legal are the fields where accuracy is really important of
Correct.
what we're talking about or what we're doing, right? So it is really important to incorporate LLMs in a way where it's either highly confident or we have sort of good verification integrated into it, that we are not making things up. Recently, a couple of months back, if you have heard the news that in the States, someone used Chat GPT to come up with some legal arguments for an
Mm-hmm.
actual case. And Chat GPT made some non-existing cases. So it took some non-existing cases, which were the dummy cases taught in colleges, thought it's real, and created an argument based on that. And the
Okay.
person and the lawyer used it in the court, which was a big embarrassment for them. So that's why it's important to make sure what, especially in those fields, what
Right.
LLMs are saying are correct, and they are not basically hallucinating or it's the wrong information.
I think it's a very good point. So you see the growth, what you've mentioned is, of course, content creation, where I am there too. I see a big
Mhm.
jump. Of course, even in Zoom, what we are talking right now, I have an AI companion which I click right away. It's an AI companion, not an LLM,
Yeah.
but it helps me blur my background, set it up, voice, everything. But anyway, I use a lot of Chat GPT for my content creation. I use some other tools for video creation. But the growth you mentioned is content creation, marketing, sales and marketing segment. That's there, finance and legal. Even so, you're seeing growth in this three areas, but specifically around text right now. The
Mm-hmm.
big growth is around text. Maybe
Yeah,
there are other areas also which will grow, because being a
definitely.
GPT model,
Mhm.
Falcon, Llama, what you spoke about,
Yeah.
around text there is some innovation happening, but of course I think there are other areas also where your growth is coming up, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Have you
Yeah,
so
definitely.
mhm, mhm. Go ahead please.
Education is obviously one another which I missed. text heavy or language heavy, obviously medium of
Education.
work, obviously that's gonna be impact. I mean, I've already seen a lot of uh, teachers and the professors in the universities. They are split on, like half of them, let's say they encourage students to use that because that's the technology we have available now, they should learn how to use it responsibly.
Mm,
Some still say it's wrong and it's sort of considered cheating. So I've seen that eventually we will come to a consensus on that. But right now, even the education system or the education sector is also kind of divided into how
correct.
to exactly adapt LLMs or Chat GPT or other models.
I mean, there's a big joke. You might have seen there's a lot of Instagram posts which run on like, "Hey, I did this on ChatGPT, copy pasted it into the exam, and it worked." But yeah, so I studied in the US. So there's a big problem of plagiarization. Let's see how it
Mhm.
goes. But that's a whole system and a whole. Uh, so let's say now, with that said, I am a startup. I
Mhm.
am I'm a finance, legal, education, or a content creation startup. I want to start my own LLM journey, right?
Mhm.
What do you think you suggest? How do you think? What kind of? I know it's a very open-ended question. I don't know how to
Mhm.
ask it properly, but let's say I'm a startup. I'm coming up, get
Mhm.
create my own model, maybe. What do you think I should think about?
Uh, so there again, there are a couple of options, right, for that. One
Mm-hmm.
is you mentioned creating your own model. That's one thing which is really complex and time and resource consuming, actually. I mean, OpenAI spent years building that and millions of dollars. So for example, if you're a startup, maybe creating your own from scratch is might not be a valid strategy, right? Because not only the amount of data you need,
Mm,
the amount of basically computing, basically you will need, right, high performance computing, then basically the whole architecture to process all the data and everything. But there are easier routes to basically make use of what all is already existing, right?
yes.
One of the sort of two routes on that is, one is obviously using the existing APIs, right? So obviously OpenAI provides, obviously ChatGPT is their customer facing, sort of user
Right.
facing application, but they also provide APIs which organizations can use, right? You can use GPT 3.5, GPT-4, different context windows, now their DALL-E, the
Mm,
image model as well. Then obviously I mentioned Anthropic's Cloud. They also have an API where you can use Cloud One and Cloud Two both to basically make use of the models they have created to
mm-hmm.
process the language tasks you have, right? Uh,
Correct.
Keeping in mind those are general purpose text generation engines, right?
Mm,
Then comes where obviously we can make use of, as we say, what we ask LLMs are what we call the prompt. What prompt we are giving it to the model to kind of generate a response for, right?
mm-hmm.
And there are ways to basically sort of fine tune a bit what comes falls under prompt engineering, right? Where we can give it some examples and design a prompt in a way that it understand better what we're trying to achieve, right? It can sort of define exactly what we are looking for
Mm-hmm.
better than
Mm-hmm.
just asking general purpose, right? For example, if we're talking about, hey, summarize this article for me, right? It will summarize, but that's a general purpose prompt. Let's say we are talking about a legal article. A better prompt maybe is uh, summarize this article for me using uh, or based on a following example, and we give sort of a legal article and a summary
Mm,
as an example, so it understands how that summary is generated for that article, and then uses sort of that same common sense reasoning to create an output for the another article we are asking it to generate. So that's sort of where you can kind of better define the outputs. But then also, if we have to go a bit more deeper, there is a option of fine tuning these models, right? OpenAI has a sort of licensing deal or integration with Azure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Deploy their models on Azure and fine tune it, right? We can fine tune on OpenAI's platform itself, but there is that another availability if a startup is basically based in a
Go wanna
Microsoft
go.
Azure ecosystem, right? Same thing, AWS had an offering Bedrock, which was only invite only, but as of end of last month, now it's generally available called AWS Bedrock, where we can basically deploy these models. They're available on Hugging Face and everything. Anthropic's cloud model is basically available on AWS architecture. We can deploy that, fine tune that, and use that, right? So it's much better option to either use the APIs or fine tune the existing models than basically creating our own models from scratch.
Wow. I mean,
Right.
you trigger a lot of ideas to me already. So, of course, healthcare also came in when you're talking to me. I mean, if we have proper data, so it looks like I think content creation, finance, legal, education, and healthcare maybe, because if we can proper ask questions about the patient's condition and it can spit out a proper response, it might help the uh, physician treat better. Okay, that's another thing.
Definitely.
So prompt engineering can be a startup by itself. Bedrock and OpenAI Azure fine tuning models. So there are two different directions I think you can go. So rather than creating your own LLM, which if you want to, you can, but
Yeah,
if you want to go faster in the curve, use the existing models, fine tune it, or improve it by prompt engineering, and that might be a couple of startups ideas is what I mean. Do you think that's a good summary of what you said, or
pretty
did I
much.
miss
Yeah.
any? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much. I mean, obviously, it's always an option to create your own, but it's better, as they say, to stand on the shoulders of the giants. So OpenAI, Anthropic, and
Yes.
Facebook's with open source models have done, and the whole open source community has done a wonderful job. So why not use that and build on top of that
Yeah.
instead of basically creating our own from scratch?
Yeah. So we use YouTube where our podcast goes rather than creating our own podcast system. So we just use it. Okay. All right. With that said, so of course startups want to think about it, uh, but the future generation or current generation who's coming out of the market or people who want to change their careers, what kind of career options uh, do people have in these LLM startups or big companies who are implementing LLM based information? What kind of, is it a developer based work? Is it research based work? Do you know, yeah, whatever you want to suggest. No,
Uh,
that helps others. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, one thing, if we're talking about the technical sector, right?
Mm-hmm.
LLMs, as with any other sector, are going to have an impact. So even if I'm writing front and back end code where I might not be directly working with LLMs, but there are code generation tools, right? Copilot, which are based on sort of LLMs, which can help me with writing my code, right?
Right.
So if a person is in a tech sector, it will definitely be useful to learn to use these tools, right? If I'm writing a code, it's helpful to use GitHub Copilot because
Correct.
it's can improve my productivity. Again, keeping in mind that sometimes it can be wrong. It can give you an answer for or can fix a bug, but it can also create a tech debt, right? That's another
Correct.
discussion that a lot of people using Copilot will end up large amount of tech debt in their code base than not using. But again, with a little bit of human supervision, we can tackle that, right?
Yes.
Uh, then comes sort of on the deeper end, if you are directly working with LLMs, right? There are a lot of career options there. There are research scientists, data scientists, obviously is a wide area, but working with sort of NLP, right? NLP scientists who can work with natural language processing, working on LLMs. Then obviously machine learning engineers who use, build, and deploy large language models for various different applications. Generally, they are responsible for model training, deployment, and maintenance, or integrating the algorithms which data scientists or research scientists have worked on, right? That's definitely sort of high impact field when it comes to LLMs or NLP. Then there is another sort of field which is emerging, which is also called, or a job profile which is emerging, prompt engineering, or let's say content generation specialist, right?
Mm,
Who can
mm,
use these models to the best of its abilities, right? Uh, right now, because prompt engineering is something which is really new for all of us, right? Uh, Being a specialist in that is a job profile, but my opinion
mm-hmm.
might be a bit controversial is that eventually prompt engineering right now, yes, is becoming a job profile,
The
but
GPT can
eventually
do that too.
dissipates
Yeah.
into, because everyone will need to know how to do prompt engineering. So then it will become a sort of more generic and everyone will need to know this profile, this sort of job profile will dissolve.
Yeah.
Not, I mean, anytime right now, maybe in like coming years, right?
Yeah.
As people sort of become like, it will become for any job, it will be sort of knowing how to use Google
Yeah.
search, right?
I mean, I can give you an example. Very good. You actually put it very well because when you're talking about it, the way it reflected on me is when we 10 years, 15 years back, when I was coming out of college, HTML was a big thing, right?
Yeah,
Then now we use Square and Wix. And in between that, there was a big, and I think still there are in digital marketing experts used to be there who used to do SEO specialists.
yeah,
They know what kind of tags to use for my search engine to hold my web page well. So these will prompt engineers know what kind of prompts to use for my chat GPT to work well. Uh, but eventually now what has happened is all this SEO is given by Square. I mean, Square is a platform, Wix is a platform which gives everything. But yeah, I agree, but there might be a lot of time
yeah,
to
yeah,
get there. It's a very good point.
exactly.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
basically, I mean, sort of what I'm trying to say is prompt engineering is definitely a new job profile which
Mm,
someone can enter into, but if they decide to, okay, I would like to apply and work as a prompt engineer, that should not be the end goal. The goal should be,
mm,
it should be an entry to the world of LLMs and working with language generation models, right? Uh, Start working as a prompt engineer, but then advance in the field. Do not
right.
stay as a prompt engineer maybe 10 years from now,
Right.
right?
Makes sense. So that is your foot into the door if you want to get into the AI. So your foot into the door, but you can branch out towards business applications or technical applications and take your direction that way.
So
So with
another,
that said, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Mm,
oh, sorry. Yeah. Another one really important sort of, it's already a job profile and a section of really important when it comes to AI, but with now LLMs is really important, and we should more focus on is obviously the AI governance and
mm,
basically AI policies, right? It is again, as I mentioned in the start, it's really important to make sure what these LLMs are doing are reasonable, are legal, right? But also what kind of data it's using to basically train on, right? There are a lot of legalities, policies around that. If you have heard, a lot of artists recently are trying to sue OpenAI for using their content, right? Book writers
yes.
and stuff. So there is a big scope of being sort of job profile coming up is like AI policy analyst, maybe AI governance, right? AI policy advocates, right?
Mm,
That is another sort of section of job profiles which are coming up, which may not be as technical as a research scientist still in the field, but highly important right
yeah.
now at this point, right?
Yeah.
Which also deal with like bias, human bias, right? So all those policies and governance around what kind of data we use, how it is handled, is also going to be really important.
I think when you're talking, it's exciting me again because it goes into the standard SDLC software development lifecycle where our model is built. Now we're going to have QA testing layer there, which is our advocates and testers. I don't want to
Yeah.
policies or testers. So your quality control happens. Once the QC happens, only then the language model is out because it does not sue us and the company doesn't lose more money than actually creating it.
Yeah.
So you have prompt engineers helping your customers, helping your customers improve their searches every day, and your quality control analysts who are making sure that only the right quality goes out, and you have
Yeah.
your machine learning engineer research internet what making your LLM better. So it's a good funnel, looks like. Yeah, so
It definitely is. Yeah.
it's a good funnel, I
Even on
mean.
like architecture level, right? Ethics officers, data governance officers, like how we have existingly, like with SOC compliance, with GDPR compliance, right? We have governance officers when it comes to data. Those job profiles are sort of also are already expanding into the LLMs,
Yep.
how that data is used and everything. So on sort of that umbrella, that architecture level, also there are a lot of jobs in that ethics and governance section as well.
Okay, so there are support functions also which will handle. So looks, we spoke about a lot of functions. So standard data engineering layer or your data layer. From there, you have your LLM, ML engineers, research scientists. You have your quality control, prompt engineers, and support functions who are doing your proper governance. A lot of options. But let's say if you want to see, um, this is at a level like what I have to search in Indeed.com or Monster.com. But what kind of skills, you don't have to touch upon all of them, but even if like 3, 4 skills, which people can, our viewers who are predominantly 90% data engineers shifting towards AI as mindset. If that is fine, but otherwise, what on a general basis, what kind of skills? AI is a big thing. Let me tell you one thing. When I talk to people, I was talking to one of the person in Africa yesterday. She's from Nigeria, and she was asking me, Raghav, how can I get into OpenAI? I said, tomorrow I'm going to talk to somebody. I'll ask him that question. Her goal is to join OpenAI. I'm like, what should I learn? I don't know. So that's a question from her name is Qme, and I'll probably introduce her to you also. Qme asked this question. I want to join OpenAI. Raman, what kind of skills do you think I should have?
uh Really good question. So let me tackle the first OpenAI and then we will go generic.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, or fortunately, OpenAI only hires on site because it's a startup. They want everyone to be there. So
Oh,
you need
okay.
to be located into a commutable distance from their headquarters.
Okay. Okay.
That's the
Okay.
first hurdle.
Okay.
So having said that, obviously OpenAI started with the core of LLMs. They have research scientists, machine learning data scientists, right? AI researchers. Those are all the fields they are still hiring into. But also because now OpenAI is becoming sort of a de facto go-to for all the organizations as well, uh, to use their models. They obviously initially when they started with their APIs and infrastructure, it was really performing that not that well, right? In terms of scalability and stuff. They are investing a lot on that as well. If you go to OpenAI's career page, you will see all kind of roles from now, from software engineering to data engineering to architecture to engineering managers for basically scalability, and engineering managers and engineering teams for AIs, right? So now they are expanding sort of more like and sort of a growth stage startup which they are on, or enterprise where it's not just the core research but also you can still work for OpenAI if you are a software engineer, right?
Mm,
Because now they have their full-fledged platform which they need to support and improve and work on. So there are a lot of, and they are actually hiring really aggressively.
okay.
So it's worth looking into, provided you are in a commutable
Right.
distance
Right.
or you are open to moving there.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Good.
Yeah. But in general, for 99% of our population who are not living there, in
Yes.
commutable or uh, for us who are working in other organizations using OpenAI or using GPT or LLMs, basically, I would say it's really important even for like data engineering to really understand the basics, right? We maybe do not need to understand the inner workings as good as a machine learning engineer or a data scientist, but understand the basics how LLM works, right? Because understanding how they reason also helps in creating proper prompts,
Hmm.
also integrating well, right? Working
Correct.
with the LLMs. That's definitely something like understand the basics of NLP, deep learning, maybe a bit of neural networks as well, and understand how they're trained and used, right? Then obviously uh, explore again different frameworks are coming up, right? Obviously GPT and other uses transformer frameworks. Understand what they are. Try GPT, not just GPT or chat GPT. There are a lot of open source models now, mostly on Hugging Face. There are Anthropic Cloud, right, on AWS Bedrock, BERT by Google and all.
Yep.
Basically dip your toes in all those and try to understand why, when to use which one, what is different in those, right? How fine tuning works for each of those,
Hmm.
what impact does like different parameters have and stuff. So that is going to be really important, obviously. And
Hmm.
then specifically talking about sort of the data engineering component of that, obviously processing all that data, what kind of data need to be processed. Vector databases are becoming really big part of now data engineering because vector databases are used for LLMs as well, right? How data engineers are going to work with those, store, how to architect those, so that because vector databases are not as easy as SQL or Postgres, because they, again, the storage, how to create those vectors, how to search around those vectors and stuff are relatively newer, sort of
Hmm.
are becoming more common concepts. So understanding that will definitely are going to help in building those systems, right? Uh,
Correct.
then basically, yeah, learn about fine tuning, how to fine tune specific models, right? If you
Right.
know how to sort of fine tune a couple of major ones, again, language is basically transferable. You don't need to know how to fine tune all 20 or 30 models, right? If you know
Right.
how to fine tune maybe GPT, Cloud, Llama, that's really
Good
helpful.
enough. Yeah. Yeah.
And basically,
And
yeah,
what kind of technical skills is all this happening in Java, Python, or is it like different languages? What is the favorable technical language across right now?
I mean, sort of universally for any data engineering, data science, and NLP now, Python has become the de facto, right?
Okay.
Uh, Java is there, but I would say Java is more sort of in what I have seen.
Yep.
Obviously, I cannot say I have seen every kind of implementation and concept, but
Yeah.
Java is more in terms of enterprise integrations and using those LLMs, right? But generally, Python,
Mm,
uh, maybe a bit of Scala on the data processing side,
right.
right, is used. But in terms of building those model is mostly Python, right?
Good.
So if you are in Python, basically going to work on the models, maybe Python. If you are working on the data engineering side of those things, uh, obviously Python, maybe Scala, some stream processing.
Like Kafka or something, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Mhm. I mean, it's a very good. I mean, if I summarize it, the way you put it is know your landscape first, right?
definitely.
So there are Llama, Falcon, GPT, Bird. There are so many things. Pick one or two, try to understand what they're doing, research about this, and what gets aligned to you. Maybe you are more on the prompt side, you're more on the data engineering side, or on the machine learning research side. Pick that. Universally, you have Python definitely running all across. But
Yeah.
once you have understood your landscape, go deep, drill into it, and then you'll probably get into the right skills of it. But looks like knowing the landscape is a bigger issue here than not an issue. Knowing the landscape is a bigger win for you because you can use the same language across, but knowing the Landscape is more
Exactly.
important.
Yeah. Also because it's relatively new, right? So, I
Yes.
mean, every week something new is coming up, either it in the open source or new versions of the LLM models, proprietary models, new startups, and also it is really important to tap into the ecosystem and stay up to date, right? Stay persistent on learning, or at least staying up to date with what is happening, and then you can kind of dig deep and decide which component you want to sort of specialize in.
Awesome. And it was a great discussion, but as a personality, you have we have not touched upon the main. You had a decade long or 13, 14 years of experience in this industry. Um, you're at a position where our newer subscribers or newer listeners, when I say newer subscribers, newer listeners, the newer age, I should have corrected,
Mhm.
who are just coming out of college, right? Um, that's the primary segment who are most confused generally.
Mhm.
And that is where our mentorship program, where I see a lot of confusion because what happens is it is an age of having an LLM, but is a
Mhm.
scary part is they are bombarded with information, right?
Exactly.
They are told if you become an AI engineer, you are the topmost person in the world. And they've said, no, data engineering is the topmost person. So they're so confused. Um,
Mhm.
as a personality perspective or an attitude perspective, what are your tips and suggestions for those newly coming out of college, maybe AI, but with your entire experience, any kind of thing? And that would be my last question.
So I have a bit of a different take on that.
Mm-hmm.
I do not personally, I do not like comparing across verticals, right?
Mm,
What I'm trying to say is in one scenario, in one organization, in one specific stream, a specific patient, as you said, maybe like an AI engineer can be the topmost. But then, if an industry is heavily or an organization is heavily into data processing or data gathering, they might
yes,
not have use for an AI engineer. There, maybe the staff or principal data engineer is the top of the sort of
correct.
ladder. Being concerned about what is the topmost position, it's really important to select a vertical or sort of a range of scenarios where you would like to work in and be best at that. When I started my career, obviously, I started sort of as a full stack engineer, worked in front end, back end, database design, architecting systems. That is where I realized my interest more than front end is in the back end, that too, like data intensive applications,
Mm,
right? I decided to go for my master's. I went to Germany. I did my master's in data, applied computer science, where the majors was called distributed system development, to basically process large amount of data, which now we call data engineering. The term was even
correct.
not
This
sort of
correct.
back then. Yeah. So things change, technologies change, but because tech field is so long, like anyone on an average is going to have 30-35 years sort of working cycle in their life if they are in the tech. When you are for so long in a field, it is important to be really interested in, and it's even more important that you are interested in tech if you want to stay that long, because sort of every 6 months something new comes in engineering or in the tech sector. So if you're interested, then only you will be persistent, then only you will keep on learning those, then only you
Mm,
will become right.
mm,
So it's very important you choose a vertical where you are interested in, you're excited about, and then be the best in that vertical, right?
good.
And keep learning, keep improving. I mean,
And
I've known a person, not now, but 10 years back. They retired 10 years back. They were an expert in COBOL. Now,
correct.
COBOL is a language from 80s and 90s, right?
Right. Right.
They were such an expert that now, because back then the financial systems were still built on COBOL,
Yes.
and uh, consultant now, where the organization used to bring them in if they have any issues in their systems, because
Correct.
the younger generation didn't even understand how COBOL works.
Correct.
So they were at the top of that sort of ladder in that vertical, and they were charging 8 to 10,000 USD for a visit. So you can
Wow.
say they are at the top of the sort of ladder, and they are at the top there, right?
Yeah.
Even with the vertical, because they stayed with it, they were persistent, they were interested in that, and they
Yes.
the best out of that. So basically, yeah, explore everything, then choose your calling, and then stay persistent in that.
Okay, it's a very good point. And the other point you said is, which really hit me, is your length of journey is 30-35 years,
Yeah,
right? Your entry point might be like, hey, I'm just a database guy, I'm not an AI guy now, but maybe 3 years down the line, you might shift into AI because
yeah,
technologies are changing. So
exactly.
amazing. Be persistent with that, and automatically things will change. So that's the takeaway. Thank you everybody for watching today. And if you have any questions to Raman or me, please put them in the comments. And I'll try to get Raman's time if you have any specific questions. So much, Raman, for your time. All the best for your startup journey, for your adventures in LLM, and all the best. That's what I can say.
Thank you, Raghav, for having me.